Greetings and welcome back to yet another episode of the Daily Run, and today we're playing as Isaac. So we haven't played as this character in a really long time, and the biggest charm to me of Isaac is the fact that you can create your own luck with this 6. And maybe that's usually a good thing, but in this particular case, it got undermined by the fact that we found the D100 in the very first treasure room. Now the D100 is a great item. It basically allows you to win the game instantly as soon as you find it, because it just devolves into you pressing the spacebar button enough times until eventually you're guaranteed to get a good run. Maybe not guaranteed, but the likelihood of that occurring is very high. And I think in like 99% of the cases, if you just use the D100 enough times, eventually you're gonna arrive at a really strong run and you basically won't have to worry about anything. So for that exact reason, and because I like a challenge in my daily run sometimes, I usually decide to skip the D100 because I feel like it doesn't really bring any benefits. And when you do have a strong run, it feels much better when you feel like you've earned it and maybe you feel like you did the hustle. And it's always exciting to maybe find a really strong item in something like the devil room or maybe the treasure room. But if you just reroll into it and suddenly you're overpowered, I feel like that's maybe not as exciting. But in this particular case, I feel like the run forced our hand a bit, and that is just by the virtue of the fact that we found a tears down pill, which is obviously not great, and the fact was that the very first floor was also, I would say, a bit long. It wasn't necessarily long, it just took a lot of time, and because I used so many of my bombs, I was unable to find a secret room, and I just figured instead of having and struggle on this particular run, why not just go the easy route in this one? I haven't picked up the D100 in a really long time, so I might just meant as well to try and have a good run. Well, even in spite of that, the run wasn't all that stellar until much later into the game, and I'm not really sure what it is, especially because I think the biggest score or the highest score I saw on the leaderboard today is 72,000, and that is the highest absolute score I think anyone has ever achieved in this game, which means that they must have found basically everything that you need in order to really get to there. So not only did they break the game and they didn't take any damage penalty, they also found a way to really do some of those last floors again over and over again, which means that past a certain point, that means that the early start of the game must have also been really strong. So either they found something like the blank card and the Yarrow room, which allowed them to have just a lot of items at the start, maybe like a golden chest or whatever, or maybe they just used the D100 in such a way that allowed them to reroll into a really strong run, and maybe they found breaking later down the road. Well, the second option definitely didn't happen to me, and maybe if you use the D100 in a particular shop, maybe you find some of those items or some of the combinations I've just described, but I was unable to really get past a certain point. I did get the sponge transformation pretty fast, which was obviously very good, because even if you reroll and you reroll into a bunch of bad items, because you have the transformation, your base damage is still gonna be at least a little bit relatively high, which is gonna allow you to go through some of those rooms much easier. But even beyond that, it just, like, if you look at my items as I reroll, maybe some of them have a little or maybe a slight DPS upgrade, but overall it's nothing to write home about, and really it's just nothing that I would say packed a punch. The very first reroll was probably the best, and maybe this one is as well, just by the virtue of the fact that we got the damage upgrades and we got some of those DPS items that we so desperately need. But none of those runs were as strong that I would actually be comfortable in my shoes, so I would be able to just enter a room and basically destroy everything, which is basically what you're gunning for when you have a run like this one. This reroll in particular was also a bit unfortunate because we have Judas as Shadow, and it would have been ideal if it could actually trigger it and of course just get that 2 damage multiplier. But I didn't find a reliable way to do it on this floor, so I just decided to keep re-rolling and hoped that maybe eventually I'd get something better. But it did take a lot of time, and not only that, it required me to went to the shop and actually use the restock machine in there alongside the battery charges that I got with using the D100, or at least the D20 part of the D100, which rerolled some of the other consumables into more battery charges. And only after like 10 rerolls did I actually come to a run that I considered powerful. And it was mainly because we had the tech axe at that point and really nothing else that would have helped us in that regard. That's not to say that some of the other runs weren't strong, obviously they were, but it's just more due to the fact that they just weren't all that powerful. Like, sure, maybe we had 10 damage, maybe our tear delay was at 5, but with the D100 you really want to gun for something much stronger than that, especially when you consider you have to go fight Mega Satan in the end. You just want a really pungent run, if that's maybe not the right word to use, but you get what I'm saying. So I did skip the entirety of the Womb 1 and the Womb 2 floors, mainly because of the fact that nothing really changed or nothing really happened. The only other thing that did happen that is maybe noteworthy is the fact we got Sackboy. or sackhead, whatever, but that wasn't all that influential. Sure, we got a few more consumables, but besides that, and maybe a few cards here and there, it didn't really contribute to the win in either way. And maybe the only other thing that's important here that really, I would say, increased our DPS in this regard was the fact that we got the Lump of Coal. The Lump of Coal is just a great item in general. It works really well with Brimstone, and also Tech X, and also I think all of the technologies. Increases your damage so much, and the best part about it is it's not really tied to your damage stat, it's just tied to how far away you are from the enemies. And that's especially useful against enemies like Harsh, because the rooms are really large, but also it's amazing against the likes of Mega Satan, because if you want to avoid the most of the damage, and because you have infinite range with your Attack X shot, you actually get a lot of damage boost just from being in the corner, and that does allow you to pretty much instantly kill them. So as we were going through the cathedral here, maybe I was focusing on some other things as well. I was looking if I can utilize maybe my Bloody Penny alongside something like a Temperance card, if I do manage to get it, in order to get a break going, and maybe try to get infinite points that way. But sadly, none of the Temperance cards or the Blood Bank machines I found paid out with the Ivy bag. I only was able to get a few cents out of it, which is obviously good, but it's definitely not what I would consider ideal. I'm not sure if this would have been enough to actually warrant an infinite amount of money and an infinite amount of points, but it would have definitely helped our situation in the end, especially because I wasn't fast enough in order to get to boss rush in time. And maybe that's another thing I want to talk about. I did find that a lot of people made it to boss rush, and to a certain extent, obviously I know how that happened, because at a certain point you get to see the whole map, so you can just make a bomb rush for it, and I was stuck behind trying to reroll into a really good run, and I could have done that easily on boss rush. So what I could have done, of course, is go into boss rush and then just start rerolling every other or every third wave, and eventually, of course, I would arrive at the same spot that I arrived naturally just by going to the shop, except I would ended up with more points in the end. But the problem there was I was very low at speed. I think my speed was at 1.03 for the majority of the run, and the floors, and especially the Necropolis, was absolutely huge, and I just really wasn't able to get there fast enough. I hope that maybe one of the rerolls would net me in a really strong run, and I would be able to just really blaze through the rooms and just kill everything that comes into sight, but nothing like that happened, especially not when, at least not until I went to that shop and really spent like 2 minutes in there, and at that point it was already too late to get to boss rush. But besides that little detail, I feel like, again, this was just a very generic D100 run, and it would have been a relatively good score if I finished with something like 50,000, but at the same time, someone did end up with 72,000 points in this daily, and I think, like I said before, that's a new record, and not really sure if it's possible to get much higher than that. I'm sure that someone will find a way, but this is definitely like in the top 10 possible scores, and I'm not really sure if we're gonna see a higher score than that. Maybe we're gonna see it if some new items get introduced, but in the current state of the game, I feel like 72,000 is a pretty good limit, and if you achieve that, man, that kudos to you, because only one of those scores has been ever achieved in the entire history of Isaac, and that, to me, that's in a relative sense amazing, and the fact I played the same daily as that person is, I guess, at least a little bit honorable, if nothing else. I'm a little bit ashamed that I didn't even break 50,000 in this one, but hey, at least we had fun with the D100 and we managed to get to the end, so I hope that counts for something. So with that said, I hope you enjoyed this one, guys, and I hope to see you next time.